Ladies and gentlemen, I had the great honor and pleasure of first welcoming President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, the President of Brazil, in Davos in January 2003. Just a few days after, Mr. President, you took office. You came and you spoke about your vision for Brazil and the agenda for your new government. Since that time, President Lula da Silva has led a positive economic transformation of Brazil. He has stabilized Brazil's economy, and as he has promised, he has worked very hard on behalf of its poorest citizens, fighting against hunger and poverty. Today, 4 years later, we have the great pleasure to welcome you back to Davos, together with a very important ministerial delegation. We have the pleasure to welcome you back at the beginning of your second term in office, after winning just some weeks ago a second round election with an impressive 60% of the electorate. And this time you come when Brazil has very favorable economic conditions with a healthy trade surplus, robust foreign exchange reserves, subdued inflation and falling interest rates. Mr. President, your country has become a kind of model for pursuing sound economic policies and at the same time integrating the country into the global economy under the motto of globalization with a human face. This morning we are looking forward to hearing from you what you have set as objectives for your renewed mandate. Mr. President, on behalf of all of us, a very cordial welcome again to Davos.
Well, first of all, I would like to greet Mr. Schwab, Executive President of the World Economic Forum. I'd like to greet Mr. Schwab. I also like to greet my ministers that came together with my delegation, Minister Fulan, the Trade Minister of Brazil, the Governor of the Central Bank of Brazil, Meirelles, Foreign Affairs Minister Celso Amorim. I see Paulo Coelho, our right representative invited, that is here, and Gabriele, my dear friend, President, Chairman of Petrobras, the state oil enterprise. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, well, actually, I truly wanted to come back to the Davos Forum as if it was a political necessity to talk and address a forum where 4 years ago I came to Davos for the first time and in this international forum. And it was here that it was highlighted the idea of the Zero Hunger Program, a program that viewed to minimize the suffering of 11 million families in Brazil that earn or lived below the poverty line. After the end of my first term, I can say to all of you that although we have not done everything that we would like to have done, we did much more than much more than ever was done in the past history of our country, talking about welfare programs and social policy. We developed the Zero Hunger program. Within the Zero Hunger program, we developed the Bolsa Familia program, which is the family stipend that today serves 11 million families, those that receive less than $60 a month per capita. They receive this aid from the government. And it's mandatory to get this aid that the people that are being benefited by this welfare program, they have to put their kids in the school, and the pregnant woman has to make its exams, and the children have to take their vaccines. And we also assumed the commitment till the year 2008 to take power, electric energy to more than 2,000 points in Brazil that did not have power energy, and we managed to fulfill that program, and we took power energy, electric energy for 5 million people. So electric energy, where the government has it takes the expense, the federal government contributes with 80% and 20% of the states. Until the year 2008, we will end with this program, so we avoid that any family in Brazil would not have electric power. And at the same time, we developed an agrarian reform program. We had 380,000 families that were settled with a total of 31 million hectares of land that were nationalized for the agrarian reform program. And possibly Brazil never had known before a credit policy that we developed during our first term for family agriculture and small farmers, from $1 billion of financing small family agriculture to going up to $5 billion for financing for the next crop, 2007 and 2008. And Brazil never knew a microcredit policy that we followed in these 4 years of my term too, unprecedented microcredit policy. I believe that the amount of new jobs that we created in Brazil in the last 2 decades, we have never known so much creating jobs as we did with 5 million jobs contracts that we had in these last 4 years. And as Mr. Schwab said before, the economy, we experienced a moment of high self-esteem domestically and also external confidence on our economy, because our economy never before was in such a privileged situation as it is today. So Brazil didn't know how to grow with low inflation rates. Brazil did not know how to export with the growth of the domestic market. So every time that we made an option to grow with our exports, we killed the domestic markets. And when we went back to the domestic markets, we would kill our exports. And so Brazil learned to combine a growth policy for exports, but with the growth of the domestic market, controlling inflation, but growing the economy. There is a surplus in current accounts, in our foreign trade and foreign currency reserves for a long time that Brazil never had before. We have $87 billion in hard currency in reserves, which leaves Brazil in a very privileged situation. And we have paid our debt with IMF and with the Paris Club without having any trauma doing so, proving that democracy and seriousness are two tools that are very efficient so that we can make the economies grow and the people improve their living conditions. But this was not only in Brazil. There was a change, an important change in South America in these last 4 years. The geopolitical map of South America has changed. All the rulers have been shifting power in the last 4 years, and all the new governments in South America with more or less emphasis, all without any differentiation, have strong and deep social commitments that for a long time our dear South America never had felt. So that's why I have high hopes that for the next 4 years, not only Brazil, but also the South American continent will play an extraordinary role. You have followed, and we said that in the beginning of our term that we would work to change the world geography, to change the world trade geography. And I hope that now in the Doha round, the next Doha, will guarantee that we'll have a substantial change, that there's no other way for us to end poverty if we don't give opportunities to the poor countries to develop themselves. It is necessary to stop with the mania from the rich countries to give out money, hand over money to rulers that sometimes don't even apply that money in a correct form in what it should be destined for. It's necessary that the investment should be in development projects, because this will generate jobs, will generate wealth, and will generate the improvement of the quality of life of the people of the continent. Brazil made this option in South America, for South America, and then Brazil made an option for a new integration with Africa, with Asia. We created the G20, and today I believe that no one can talk about foreign trade in the world without taking into account the existence of South America and the existence of Brazil and the existence of China, India, because these are countries that are now going through an exceptional process of transformation. Very well, after the end of my first term, now we don't have to only talk about what we did in the past, and now we have to experience and think about what we want to do yet for the next 4 years. In my second term, there's another commitment with Brazil, with the Brazilian people, and with South America. First of all, let's continue to work very strongly so that we create a South American community of nations. We are convinced that South America will have to integrate itself more and more, and for that we need a very good policy with good projects and with good integration policies. There will be no integration without railroads, without bridges, without telecom, without airline integration. There's no integration without these things. So it's important on our side that we have to build projects that makes it possible for the world to see that we're not only making speeches when we talk about integration, but we're concretizing with concrete projects, works that could qualify for the rest of the world the true integration in South America, like the highway that we're financing Peru, linking Brazil to the Pacific Ocean going through Peru, a highway of almost 1,800 kilometers. Very well, my second term, we started the year releasing a new program, a new development program for Brazil, a development program that takes into account three major aspects. The first aspects are changes in the economic policy, and especially in tax relief and tax cuts in many industries in the country. A second moment, I'm glad that I can drink a little bit of water once in a while. A second moment are certain measures that we, some draft projects and draft bills that we can we're sending to the Congress so that we can end with the impediments to put in practice and simplify the bureaucracy and to help develop new projects. Regional development is the third element, and we should take into account the regional specificities of each part of the country, and it has to do with highways, railroads, ports, electricity, and so projects that foresees investments of $236 billion till the year 2010. I didn't follow the release of other programs in the past in Brazil, but we have certain personalities, celebrities that participate in other programs in the past in Brazil. I doubt that in any moment in past history in Brazil we released such a program with a substance and with a beginning, middle, and end as the one that we just released this last weekend. A program that foresees, above all, investments of more than $140 billion in housing projects and basic sanitation projects. In these 4 years, we want to make a small revolution, starting by the metropolitan regions, where you concentrate the great housing deficit that we have, especially mainly in those peoples that earn 0 to 5 minimum wages, and it's in the metropolitan area that you come the violence in the communities due the social fabric that is teared in the society due to family issues and many other issues that sociology one day will explain, the urban violence, and maybe psychology will also explain. But the fact of the matter is either we confront this issue now or we will never manage to overcome these hurdles. And besides that, we have the commitment to in the next 4 years in each complex industrial area in Brazil. We want to have a university extension. We want to develop also vocational training schools in these areas. We have also the commitment to take open universities to recycle the Brazilian educators at the same time in their own cities without nobody has to go to the capital of Brazil to undertake these courses. And we also have a strong commitment in trying to resolve the problem of illiteracy in Brazil, that it has fallen, but it's still very high, the illiteracy rate, and we want to tackle this very strongly. My second term for me is extremely important because we don't have to make any comparison with previous administrations. Now we have to make comparisons with ourselves. And with much more than comparing with what we did in the first term, we have to work very thoroughly. What kind of Brazil will we leave for the next administration, for the next generation? I personally am convinced that Brazil for a long time doesn't experience such an important moment that it is experiencing today. I always say that from the 50 onwards, when Brazil had Juscelino Kubitschek as president, where we grew 7% a year of our GDP, the inflation rate was around 23%, and the minimum wage didn't grow in a constant manner. I remember that during the economic miracle between 1968 and 1973, when the Brazilian economy grew 10% a year in those days, and in 1973 it grew 13.93% of the GDP, the minimum wage went down in 3.4%. In our 4 years of our term, we worked in a very harmonic way, and the minimum wage has grown up every year, and now we made a proposal for the minimum wage for the next years to the year 2023, making that the minimum wage should have every year an increase, but so that we can give sustainability to the income of the poorest people of the population. And so that's why in Brazil, the 50% more poor have now went from 10.49% of the economy and went up to 12% of their share in the economy, in the domestic economy, a growth that for a long time didn't happen for the poorest part of the population. So this is the Brazil that we are trying to show to the rest of the world, a Brazil that has found itself. A Brazil that is learning very strongly that to consolidate the democratic process in our country is not only in the speech that we can do so, but it is in the capability and our capacity to have income distribution that we can accomplish that, so that the people can feel in a very concrete way that it's worthwhile to believe in democracy, that democracy is the possibility that they have under the democratic regime. As a former metal worker leader can reach the presidency of the republic, so they can have the certainty that through the democratic process it will manage to achieve the best conditions, working conditions and living conditions. And so I would like to, and now I ask already Meirelles, the governor of the central bank, and Guido, the finance minister. I didn't say his name here. The finance minister of Brazil is here, Guido Mantega, and Minister Furlan, for the trade minister, so that we should call the American investors, the European investors, the Japanese investors, so that they, from February, March onwards, in April, they could come to Brazil and get to know closely our program for accelerating growth, the Acceleration Growth Program. Now in March, we're going to release the new educational program. It's very important to say that in this first 4 years, we had 40 university extension programs. We built 52 vocational training schools, and we want to improve this even more because we understand that it's through knowledge, through education, and scientific and technological knowledge that we will manage to make Brazil a developed country. And I learned something, and Garcia da Caf is here, and he can confirm this. I've been saying to all South American leaders, we need to stop to travel around the world and crying about and complaining about our misery and trying to blame it on someone else. We have to understand that our own people in our own countries have the responsibility for what happened in the past in South America and in Brazil. Many times the responsibility responsibility is ours. We should not blame no one outside Brazil or outside our country. We should not put the blame on other people. We have to say what we want to do, and we have to assume the commitment, the sovereign commitment with our people, and to do it without any fear to make mistakes. And so that's why I had to come to Davos to say to all of you that Brazil definitely has found the road, the path to transform itself into a serious country, a country that will be respected all around the world, and a country that has learned to walk with his head looking up, and it's not asking for favors. We only demand for rights, and that's why we're fighting together with the G20 so that the rich countries should acquire and build their consciousness that if we don't reach an agreement in the Doha round, it's useless to put the blame on Iraq. It's useless to try to think that the wars that are going around the world will be resolved with financial support. No, it's through the possibility of economic growth, of generating new jobs and income distribution that we'll manage to live in a better world with peace. I would like to end to say to all of you that we developed the biofuel program. The president of Petrobras is here, the chairman of Petrobras. We're developing a strong program in Brazil from January 2008. All Brazilian diesel oil will be a mix of 2% of biodiesel, and in the year 2010 that will reach that mix in 5%. And there's no reason that the Brazilian automobile industry should not think of manufacturing a full biodiesel engine, because the biodiesel generates jobs, generates income, generates development, and our program could serve as an example that could be financed by the rich countries to help the African countries and the Central American countries, the biodiesel program. A big country like the United States and a rich country like the United States of America, instead of having developing alcohol programs based on corn, and corn could be used as feed, animal feed, and for other reasons, it could finance poor countries through soybeans, through sunflower seeds, and through castor oil, through other bioproducts. We can produce fuel for the world, clean fuel, a non-pollutant fuel that can create jobs, and who knows, when we reach that moment, the world will live in much more peace with less wars, and then we will manage then to participate in the World Economic Forum in Davos and to participate in the World Social Forum too with much more tranquility. I perceived already that I go better in the Davos Forum because there's not so many people putting blocks on the roads to create impediments to people to reach the forum. So that means, without having no protesters on the street, it means that the right-wing sectors think that the Social World Forum has transformed itself left to the left, and the people in the left think that the Davos Forum is now going less towards the right and going to the center-left. So you don't need blockades in the roads to avoid the people to participate in the Davos Forum. I want to congratulate you all, because the stubbornness and to persevere this forum has made it possible that the world could understand that the forum was a necessity so that people could meet themselves, exchange ideas, information, to diverge, converge, but each one leaving this forum knowing that although the more we do, even though we do a lot, there's still a lot that to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think we were all impressed by the passion which you put behind a clear vision for the future of Brazil. I also want to acknowledge the presence again of the strong delegation from Brazil. So there are many opportunities, hopefully, to follow up on some of the issues you have outlined. I will invite the audience to make one or two comments. Please prepare yourself. In the meantime, I would like to ask one question, Mr. President. You presented the new development program, which is very impressive. I read it, and it was presented just some days ago. If you could tell us how you see the role of business on the one hand and the role of the government and public institutions on the other hand, and how you see the partnership, public-private partnership, as an aspect of driving particularly infrastructure projects forward and to help to make all those ambitious plans a reality.
When we elaborated the accelerated growth program, we first worked with the definition of what would be the possibility to invest from the government side. Secondly, we worked with the possibility, the concrete possibility, that many other different projects would have to be done, partnerships with the public. We should have developed private and public partnerships. The hydroelectric plant projects in the Madeira River, these are a huge hydroelectric power plant project, and these projects would have to be developed with a private sector too, in partnership, or just by the private sector only. That will depend on the private sector's investment capacity. The roads that we want to build, we sent a draft bill in the Congress. We have passed the PPP, the private-public partnership law, was passed in the Congress, and now we're building this partnership with the business sector and trying to work on top of them. But while we don't build this partnership, because many times the businessmen, they mistrust, they are very cautious when they make their investments. But the government can't wait for the private sector to make their decisions. At the same time that we are working and changing the regulatory framework so that we can attract new investments to this partnership, the government itself, per se, will have to do our homework. We have to do our own homework while we wait for the participation of the private sector. Some things that Brazil can't wait. If Brazil can't wait, because this will cause a problem for the growth, we will start to do it ourselves. We have important ports. I would mention the Rio port, Rio de Janeiro port, the Maranhão, the Schwab in Pernambuco state, and in other ports that are very important ports for Brazil, and that we cannot wait. We're waiting for 3 years to dredge these ports, and we'll do it. And as a good soccer player says, oh, we do it now or never do it. So we can't afford to wait, because it makes the Brazil cost a higher one. We lose competitiveness if we wait. The Minister Furlan is here. He knows that I'm enthusiastic of the growth of our exports, and I work hard so that we can sell all the crumbs that we produce in Brazil. And the more roads we have, the more railroads and ports, and the better are our ports, and the more partnerships we have with the Brazilian business community and with foreign business, we will have the conditions to reach our dream. I am convinced in the domestic politics in Brazil, there is an understanding of all the National Congress, of the governors, and that maybe one governor has one critique, another governor has another critique. But the bottom line is they know that this project, this new program, is not President Lula's program or a government project. It's a project for Brazil. If we're competent, if we manage to be competent, conclude everything that we want to conclude to the year 2010, those that will come after me, the next administration, will receive a Brazil in a better shape than when I went to the government. So this is good for who's Brazilian, who wants to invest in Brazil, and who wants to rule Brazil.
Question, please. Yeah. Questions or comments?
Mi nombre es Gilberto Marín de México.
I'm Gilberto Marín from Mexico. First of all, I would like to congratulate President Lula because he has demonstrated in 4 years that economic growth can be accompanied by social justice. I would also like to congratulate Minister Furlan because he has brought Brazil back into the world with a high level of exports in agriculture and manufactured products. They are dealing with the key points, especially they are working on the building of housing, $120 billion. There are a couple of points that I would like to dwell on. Real growth interest rates in Brazil are the highest in the world. This can impede economic growth. In Mexico this happened, and our real interest rates are much lower. I know it is a very difficult question. What about fiscal reform? Fiscal reform is another important driver that can help Brazil grow by 7-8% like other countries. My last question, this economic growth could find some bottlenecks, and these are the ports. You mentioned ports already, but real interest rates, ports and growth are the real possible bottlenecks.
With the interest rates that you mentioned, it is true that all of us, and the governor of the Central Bank of Brazil is here, and the president of the Republic, myself here, the finance minister, all of us, we would like enjoy a lower interest rate in Brazil. But what happens is that you can't reduce the interest rate with a magical wand. You have to create sustainability, trust in society, political and market confidence, so that you, in a dynamic way, you can start to reduce the interest rates. And we're doing that for a year. In 1 year in a row that there's a declining interest rate. And I say every day that in economics, there was an old politician in Brazil that I admired him, which was Dr. Ulisses Guimarães. He used to say, economic policy, the majority of things that we do, we don't talk about, because if we talk about it, we won't do it. And so Brazil is a country that we had a lot of past experiments. We had finance ministers that showed up and had a magical economic plan. And we invented the Collor plan, the Summer plan, the Bresser plan. So we invented many economic plans in the past of Brazil. But each one of these economic plans, 6 months after that, these plans were released, they bankrupt, they collapsed. And when they collapsed, the people that suffered with the consequences. And so I've been saying since my inauguration that there's no magic in economics. In economics, there's seriousness. And you have to understand that we did not have the economic success that we did if we had not had fiscal responsibility. It was due to the fiscal responsibility that made it possible that Brazil today, we would have a surplus in our current accounts, a surplus in our trade balance, to have $87 billion in reserves, and to reach $140 billion in exports, and to make grow the income of the poorest. The minimum wage grew. And so this is the behavior that started to build in the people's minds the certainty that we were not going on an adventure road, that we were building a country. It's a much more serious proposition. And so for that, the interest rates will continue to go down as we manage to achieve more trust, more guarantee. The more guarantee and more trust we build and convey to society, the more we can reduce our interest rates. It's also important to remember that great part of the money, especially from the business sector, and I see here many Brazilians here in the audience, we know that it's not the basic interest rates that guides the investments. Some manage to get finance in dollars at a lower interest rates. Those that won't go to dollars, they go to the National Development Bank at lower interest rates, which is the major financing bank for the industrial sector in Brazil, the National Development Bank. Agricultural credit, everybody knows that the agricultural credit in Brazil, that is at a level very important. It strengthens the Brazilian agriculture, so it's also lower interest rates for the agricultural finance. Microcredit had an extraordinary success in Brazil. And we also have lending against paycheck for the workers, and so the workers give their paycheck as a collateral for loans. This was an extraordinary success, but we almost reached 30-40 billion reais of lending money to the workers, which give as a collateral their paycheck, the discount. And so with that, we will manage to reduce the interest rates. Now, fiscal responsibility and fiscal policy, well, I've been saying that a lot of people talk with great easiness on the fiscal issue on Brazil. First of all, Brazil is a country that has things reasonably set up well. A lot is said about the deficit of the Social Security that is almost 50 billion reais. And I'm saying that the deficit doesn't come from the Social Security system. The deficit comes because we Brazilians, in the 1988 Constitution, we decided to develop the strongest social policy for the country. And so we decided to include in the benefit system of the Social Security system 6 million rural workers that did not pay their contributions. And then we have the elder statue. And then we created a special law for Social Security. To help who? To help people that did not work, that were aging, people that were carriers of disabled people. And this is an expenditure that Brazil has to assume with its poor. I don't see this as a problem. Now, if you go and pick up the Brazilian Social Security system and those that contribute for the Social Security system, workers, employees and employers, and those employees that contribute and those that receive the benefits, there's no deficit. The deficit is due to the fact that we decided to include other social groupings besides the employees and employers in a system. And I always say to the finance minister, the deficit is from the national treasury and not from the Social Security. So we can't complain about this. This is social policy, welfare programs to help the poorest people in the country. If we hadn't done this, they would be sleeping on the streets or be in jail. I don't remember what was your third comment. Oh, the ports issue. Well, we defined already about what will be our policy for the ports. We defined which are the ports. We defined that once, and things did not move forward because everything is complicated. The legislation is very complicated around the ports, and so now we decided to transform this on issue of honor for us, and we will transform and modernize the Brazilian ports and make them competitive ports with the best ports in the world.
Those were actually three questions, so we come, unfortunately, to an end of our session with President Lula. But to conclude this session, Mr. President, what would be your message to the business leaders here in the room? Very practical. Business leaders are driven or under the pressure of creating profits. At the same time, we talked a lot about the social face of globalization. What concrete proposals, what concrete advice would you give to the business audience here to combine economic efficiency with social responsibility?
Well, the effort to seek for profits, it's a good endeavor, but tough is the endeavor to avoid losses, but to seek profits, that's fine. Well, I would like to give a piece of advice, and I'm not going to merchandise Brazil now, and I'm asking you to just visit Brazil, but I'm not going to make any advertising of Brazil. But anyone that wants to earn money and profits can go to Brazil and invest in Brazil. I can guarantee that. But I can say to all of you that all of you have relations with different governments of the important countries of the world. I believe that it's very important that the Brazilian the businessmen and women of the world should participate actively in convincing the rulers of the developed countries that it's necessary that we should reach an agreement in the Doha round. It's necessary that you contribute for that. And I'm not talking about only on behalf of Brazil, because Brazil is very competitive in many fields, especially in agriculture. Brazil has no problem to compete with any country in the world. But if we wish to send a signal, a sign to the poorest countries of the planet that they will have an opportunity in the 21st century, it's necessary that the United States of America, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and above all these countries that I mentioned, they should assume the responsibility of developing a compact, so that we can reach an agreement for the Doha round. And the agreement is the following: that the United States has to diminish their subsidies. The European countries, they also have to cut their subsidies and facilitate market access for the agricultural products for the poorest countries of the the world. And we, the emerging countries, we are willing to give our contribution and open our markets in a proportional way to industrial products and service proportionally to our power. Because in the Brazilian agriculture, for example, we still have 25% of the people in the countryside. When in Europe, you have 1% of the population living in the countryside. So it can't be the same. It has to be proportional. But if we want to avoid terrorism in the world and the growth of organized crime, believe in me that the Doha Round is one of the paths that we should follow. The Doha Round could be the road of hope, of millions of human beings that wait a gesture from our side. Last year, I phoned to President Bush, I phoned to President Chirac, I phoned to Prime Minister Tony Blair, and I talked to the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, and I talked with Zapatero. So I didn't talk to God because I believe that God did already a lot of things to us. But people have to have the sensitivity, because we don't. If we won't spend in a trade agreement, we'll spend money in a war like Iraq, a bloodless war, a war that's full of blood. So we have to be sensitivity for that. And so this is the appeal that I would like to make to all the business community here. Discuss with your rulers, with your governments, and ask them to have sensitivity in this moment, and let's reach an agreement with the Doha Round. I can say to you that Brazil will fulfill its part. Brazil will play its part. We will make the concessions, the necessary concessions within its possibilities, and will convince the G20 to do so that the rich countries also make their concessions. Now, it's necessary that Europe and the United States of America should reach an understanding and an agreement, because otherwise there's no agreement.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish you all the deserved success on a national level as a national leader, but also as a global statesman, as you have shown to us today. Thank you for your presence.